The King of Ireland's son has completed all the tasks, and he has won his freedom from the enchanter of the Black Backlands, and he has won his daughter Fidelma and the slight red steed with her. Now, a steed is a horse, in case you don't know, so it's a little red horse would be a slight red steed. They crossed the river of the Ox and went over the mountain of the Fox and were in the glen of the Badger before the sun rose. And there at the foot of the hill of Horns they found an old man gathering dew from the grass. "Could you tell us where we might find the little sage of the mountain?" Fidelma asked the old man. "I am the little sage of the mountain," said he. "And what is it you want of me?" "To betroth us for marriage," said Fidelma. "I will do that. Come to my house, the pair of you. And as you are both young and better able to walk than I am, it would be fitting to let me ride on your horse." The king's son and Fidelma got off, and the little sage of the mountain got on the slight red steed. They took the path that went round the hill of Horns. At the other side of the hill they found a hut, thatched with one great wing of a bird. The little sage got off the slight red steed. "Now," said he, "you're both young, and I'm an old man, and it would be fitting for you to do my day's work before you call upon me to do anything for you. Now would you," said he to the King of Ireland's son, "take this spade in your hand and go into the garden and dig my potatoes for me? And would you," said he to Fidelma, "sit down at the quernstone and grind the wheat for me?" The King of Ireland's son went into the garden, and Fidelma sat at the quernstone that was just outside the door. He dug and she ground, while the little sage sat at the fire looking into a big book. And when Fidelma and the king's son were tired with their labor, he gave them a drink of buttermilk. She made cakes out of the wheat she had ground, and the king's son washed the potatoes, and the little sage boiled them, and so they made their supper. Then the little sage of the mountain melted lead and made 2 rings, and 1 ring he gave to Fidelma to give to the king's son, and 1 he gave to the king's son to give Fidelma. And when the rings were given, he said, "You are betrothed for your marriage now." They stayed with the little sage of the mountain that night, and when the sun rose, they left the house that was thatched with the great wing of a bird, and they turned towards the meadow of brightness and the wood of shadows that were between them and the King of Ireland's domain. They rode on the slight red steed, and the little sage of the mountain went with them part of the way. He seemed downcast, and when they asked him the reason, he said, "I see dividing ways and far journeys for you both. But how can that be," said the king's son, "when in a little while we will win my father's domain?" "It may be I am wrong," said the little sage, "and if I am not, remember that devotion brings together dividing ways, and that high hearts win to the end of every journey." He bade them goodbye then, and turned back to his hut that was thatched with the great wing of a bird. They rode across the meadow of brightness, and Fidelma's blue falcon sailed above them. "Yonder is a field of white flowers," said she, "and while we are crossing it, you must tell me a story." "I know by heart," said the king's son, "only the stories that Maravan, my father's counselor, has put into the book he is composing, a book that is called The Breastplate of Instruction." "Then," said Fidelma, "tell me a story from the Breastplate of Instruction while we are crossing this field of white flowers." "I will tell you the first story that is in it," said the king's son. Then, while they were crossing the field of white flowers, the king's son told Fidelma the story of the donkey and the seal. A seal that had spent a curious forenoon paddling around the island of Ilonbeg drew itself up on a rock the better to carry on its investigations. It was now within 5 yards of the actual island. On the little beach, there were 3 currows in which the island men went over the sea. They were turned bottom up, and heavy stones were placed upon them to prevent their being carried away by the high winds. The seal noted them as he rested upon the flat rock. He noted, too, a little donkey that was standing beyond the currows, sheltering himself where the cliffs hollowed in. Now this donkey was as curious as the seal, and when he saw the smooth creature that was moving its head about with such intelligence, he came down to the water's edge. 2 of his legs were splancelled with a piece of straw rope, but being used to such impediment, he came over without any awkwardness. He looked inquiringly at the seal. Those are some crazy words. I think that his legs are sort of tied together with some rope. And an impediment is something that kind of holds you back from doing something. It makes something really hard. The gray-headed crow of the cliff lighted on a spar of rock and made herself an interpreter between the two. So she told each other what the other one is saying. "Shaggy beast of the island," said the seal, "friend and follower of men, tell me about their fabulous existence." "Do you mean the hay-getters?" said the donkey. "You know well whom he means," said the gray-headed crow viciously. "Answer him now." "You gravel me entirely when you ask about men," said the donkey. "I don't know much about them. They live to themselves and I live to myself. Their houses are full of smoke and it blinds my eyes to go in. There used to be green fields here and high grass that became hay, but there's nothing like that now. I think men have given up eating what grows out of the ground. I see nothing, I smell nothing, but fish, fish, fish." The gray-headed crow had a vicious eye fixed on the donkey all the time he was speaking. "You're saying all that," said she, "because they let the little horse stay all night in the house and beat you out of it." "My friend," said the seal, "it is evident that men deceive you by appearances. I know men. I have followed their boats and have listened to the wonderful sounds they make with their voices and with instruments. Do they not draw fish out of the depths by enchantments? Do they not build their habitations with music? Do they not draw the moon out of the sea and set it for a light in their houses? And is it not known that the fairest daughters of the sea have loved men? When I'm awake, long o' moonlit nights, I feel like that myself," said the donkey. Then the recollections of these long frosty nights made him yawn. Then he brayed, "Hee-haw!" "What is it to live near men?" said the seal in admiration. "What wonderful sounds!" "I'd cross the water and rub noses with you," said the donkey, "only I'm afraid of crocodiles." "Crocodiles?" said the gray-headed crow. "Yes," said the donkey. "It's because I'm of a very old family, you know. They were Egyptians. My people never liked to cross water in their own country. There were crocodiles there." "I don't want to waste any more time listening to nonsense," said the gray-headed crow. She flew to the donkey's back and plucked out some of the felt. "I'll take this for my own habitation," she said, and flew back to the cliff. A habitation is a home. The donkey would have kicked up his heels, only 2 of his legs were fastened with the straw rope. He turned away, and without a word of farewell to the seal, went scrambling up the bank of the island. The seal stayed for a while, moving his head about intelligently. Then he slipped into the water and paddled off. "One feels their lives in music," he said. "Great tones vibrate round the island where men live. It is very wonderful." "That," said the king's son, "is the first story in the breastplate of instruction, the donkey and the seal. And now you must tell me a story while we are crossing the field of blue flowers." "Then it will be a very little story," said Fidelma. They crossed a little blue field of flowers, and Fidelma told The Sending of the Crystal Egg. The kings of Murias heard that King Atlas had to bear the world upon his back, so they sent him there then and there the crystal egg that would be the swan of endless tales, that his burthen for a while might lie on his shoulder scales, fair balanced while he heard the tales the swan poured forth. North world tales for the while he watched the star of the north, and east world tales he would hear in the morning, swart and cool. When the lions Nimrod had spared came up from the drinking pool, west world tales for the king when he turned him with the sun, then whispers of magic, tales from Africa, his own. But the kings of Murias made the crane their messenger, the fitful crane whose thoughts are always frightening her. She slipped from islet to isle, she sloped from foreland to coast, she passed through cracks in the mountains, and came over trees like a ghost, and then fled back in dismay when she saw on the hollow plains the final battle between pygmies and the cranes. Where is the crystal egg that was sent King Atlas then? Hatched it will be one day, and the tales will be told by men. That is, if it not be laid in some king's old treasury. That is, if the fitful crane did not lose it threading the sea. They were not long going through the little field of blue flowers, and when they went through it, they came to another field of white flowers. Fidelma asked the king's son to tell her another story, and thereupon he told her the second story in The Breastplate of Instruction. The Story of the Young Cuckoo. The young cuckoo made desperate attempts to get himself through the narrow opening in the hollow tree. He screamed when he failed to get through. His foster parents had remained so long beside him that they were wasted and sad, while the other birds, their broods reared, were vigorous and joyful. They heard the one that had been reared in their nest, the young cuckoo, scream, but this time they did not fly towards him. The young cuckoo screamed again, but there was something in that scream that reminded the foster parents of hawks. They flew away. They were miserable in their flight, these birds, for they knew they were committing a treason. They had built their nest in a hollow tree that had a little opening. A cuckoo laid her egg on the ground, and carrying it in her beak, had placed it in the nest. Their own young had been pushed out. They had warned themselves to get a provision for the terrible and fascinating creature who had remained in their nest. When the time came for him to make his flight, he could not get his body through the little opening. Yesterday he had begun to try. The two foster parents flew to him again and again with food, but now their own nesting place had become strange to them. They would never go near it again. The young cuckoo was forsaken. A woodpecker ran round the tree. He looked into the hollow and saw the big bird crumpled up. "Hello," said the woodpecker. "How did you get in here?" "Born here," said the young cuckoo sulkily. "Oh, were you?" said the woodpecker, and he ran round the tree again. When he came back to the opening, the young cuckoo was standing up with his mouth open. "Feed me," said he. "I've to rush round frightfully to get something for myself," said the woodpecker. "At least someone ought to bring me food," said the young cuckoo. "How's that?" said the woodpecker. "Well, oughtn't they to?" said the young cuckoo. "I wouldn't say so," said the woodpecker. "You have the use of your wits, hadn't you?" He ran round the trunk of the tree again and devoured a lean grub. The young cuckoo struggled at the opening and screamed again. "Don't be drawing too much attention to yourself," advised the woodpecker when he came to the opening again. "They might take you for a young hawk, you know." "Who might?" said the cuckoo. "The neighbors. They would pull a young hawk to pieces." "What am I to do?" said the young cuckoo. "What's in your nature to do?" "My nature?" said the young cuckoo. "It's my nature to swing myself on branches high up in a tree. It's my nature to spread out my wings and fly over pleasant places. It is my nature to be alone, but not alone as here. Alone with the sound of my own voice." Suddenly he cried, "Cuckoo! Cuckoo! Cuckoo!" "I know you now," said the woodpecker. "There's going to be a storm," he said. Trust a woodpecker to know that. The young cuckoo strove towards the big sky again, and he screamed so viciously that a rat that had just come out of the ditch fastened his eyes upon him. That creature looked bad at the young cuckoo. Rain plopped on the leaves, thunder crashed, a bolt struck the tree, and the part above the opening was torn away. The young cuckoo flung himself out on the grass and went awkwardly amongst the bluebells. "What a world!" said he. "All this wet and fire and noise to get me out of the nest. What a world!" The young cuckoo was free, and these were the first words he said when he went into the world. That was the last story the king's son told from Maravan's book, The Breastplate of Instruction. They had another little field of blue flowers to cross, and as they went across it, Fidelma told the king's son the story of the Cloud Women, which we will hear next time.